What's going on, everybody? Jared Sandler welcoming you into episode 72 of the Just a Set Conversation. I am so excited to share this one with you. I was super excited to get a chance to chat with this gentleman, Buddy Garrity. His real name is Brad Leland, but a lot of people might know him as Buddy Garrity from the TV show Friday Night Lights. He was also in Friday Night Lights, the movie. He's been in so much. His list of credits is incredibly lengthy. And he's a DFW guy. He won a state championship as a football player at Plano back in the day. He has performed in the theater in Dallas. But this is someone who has done it all. And actually met Brad when he was at a Cowboys game. It was the Cowboys-Packers playoff game that Aaron Rodgers helped the Packers win with his great sideline throw to Jared Cook, and then Mason Crosby with the field goal. You know which one I'm talking about. But I met Brad briefly inside the broadcast booth. Brad is a friend of Brad Shams and Babe Laufenberg. And so thanks to Brad Sham for helping to set this up. And, man, I think we spoke with Brad for a super long time. He came up to the studios. It was awesome. And I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. So here you go. Episode 72 of the Just a Set Conversation. Would appreciate if you would share the link, like, comment, any of those things that take just a second, but certainly go a long way. Alas, episode 72 of the Just a Set Conversation with Brad Leland. All right, Brad, so I ask this to everyone to start off the interview. You can take it in whatever direction you'd like. What were you like growing up?
What was I like growing up?
Hobbies, personality,
well,
whatever.
I can tell you this. Here's the deal, Jared. The main thing that I was like was, I did make good grades, so that was good. But I always got, in the little citizenship part where they sort of give you checks and minuses, I always got checks on talks too much, and I always got checks on respects others, because I was just such a mouth, I think, and such a I wouldn't say a troublemaker, because I was a good student, but I definitely did a lot of things I probably shouldn't do for laughs. The original Johnny Knoxville, do anything for money type guy.
That was you?
Oh yeah. In high school, we were in Plano High School, and it was a new little section that we were in this math class, and there were so many crickets that were just running through the new part of the school. And one time during math class, they dared me to eat a cricket. So I ended up eating quite a few live crickets and gathering. I think I got about $10. Of course, in 1971, it was nuts. It was
$10.
$10 pretty good.
Inflation.
So yeah, I did a lot of things like that early on. So
what came first, a love of sports or a love of the arts?
I think about the same time, because when I was a little boy, my mother was a singer and a piano player. My dad was an athlete, but he had also had a little bit of experience in high school. They actually went to high school with Buddy Holly at Lubbock High School. They were seniors when he was a sophomore. But my dad was into it too. So my dad would like to perform. He was a basketball player at Tech. But I think it all sort of happened at the same time, because when we first came back from Japan, I was singing in Disneyland. I was singing Davy Crockett in Disneyland. I had my little cowboy suit on.
You were young then, though.
Yeah, I was six. So,
okay.
But my dad, of course, always had me in all the sports, and he taught me golf and football and baseball and basketball when I was a kid. So I was always going to be a professional football player, of course. But at the same time, I loved choir, and I loved drama. And so I wouldn't say either one. I'd say about the same time. I think just something about that performing. Although when I did sports, I didn't think of it for the crowd. I mean, and who did? I mean, when we played sports, we didn't play it for them. We played it for ourselves because we loved the game. So that's the way mine was.
Do you have any memories of Japan?
Not really.
You were too young?
Yeah, I got a couple of vague memories, but my mom said one of the funniest ones was, we lived in a house, and I mean, it was a nice little house for Army people, but
your dad was an Army Ranger. That's why you were there.
And so my mom and I were always home, and I was supposed to be in there for my nap, and evidently I took a little a little toy, some kind of little rattler or something, and dug a hole because we had mud walls. Actually, dug a hole through the wall next to my crib or next to my bed, and my mom comes in there thinking I'm taking a nap, and I had escaped. And within about 30, she was freaking out, and she had a little tea party or something going on in there, and a couple of little geisha girls presented me at the front door. And what had happened was I had gone out. We lived very near rice paddies. And rice paddies in Japan in those days were fertilized with human waste. And so I had been playing in the rice paddies and was quite the chocolate-covered little fellow. And it was being brought home by these two little geisha girls. And here's you. They thought it was so hilarious and presented me to my mom.
That's like Shawshank. I mean, like, you go through the sewage and to get out, and you created your own. That's crazy.
Yes. So I started young, being a little crazy.
Okay, so one of the things I think is really neat, and just talking to you briefly before we started this and reading up, you've accomplished a ton in your career in the arts, but your time as a high school football player and winning a state championship at Plano is still, it's special. And I think that's, I mean, I don't know if it's, I don't want to say it's not like that in 49 other states, but there's a degree of pride in this state when it comes to high school football, and you were part of a state championship team at Plano. Now, got hurt before and weren't able to participate in that championship game. But what was that experience like? What are some of the memories that you still carry with you today?
I think the biggest memory is that, in those days when you got knee surgery, there was a giant plaster cast that went from your thigh up, your crotch, all the way to your ankle. So it's, I had one of those. So I'm on crutches on the sideline during the game with one of those on. But when we won that game, Marty Akins was the quarterback for Gregory Portland, who went on to be at UT. And anyway, he was the quarterback, and we kicked a field goal to win that game. And I'll remember, even with that cast on and crutches, I think that's the highest I ever jumped. I mean, I jumped so high. And, even not playing, just to be a part of it was really special. I mean, I think I felt just as good about it as everybody else on the team. And we played all the state games in those days were played at Darrell K. Royal Stadium in Austin. So that's where we played. And it's still something that it doesn't go away. It's one of the highlights of my life as far as the ultimate adrenaline, the ultimate being proud, because we were told by John Clark and Tommy Kimbrough, who, of course, 2 stadiums named after him in Plano. We were told by them, if you guys will just do this spring training, if you guys will really work hard in spring training and just do what we tell you to do, maybe we'll get lucky and maybe we'll win a few championship games. Maybe we can go to state. And it happened. And it was coaching, because I came from a tremendous amount of athletes in Lubbock. I mean, actually, the athletes in Lubbock that I grew up with, it being a much larger town than Plano at the time, were a better group of athletes, really, than the ones that I encountered in Plano. But the coaches were so great. And the reason we won, and the reason Plano won for so many years, was because of the coaching. It wasn't because of the talent pool.
It's funny hearing you say that, knowing your role in Friday Night Lights and the interactions you would have with the coaches, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But what do you have anything from that team? Like, do you have your jersey? Do you have anything to commemorate that?
From the Plano Wildcats? I have my letter jacket.
Okay.
And in those days, you didn't get a ring. We got a patch.
Yeah,
there's a state patch on the jacket. Of course, I wasn't very good, and I didn't get to play much, so I don't have all those millions of all state. I just have the one state championship patch, and I still have that letter jacket. Although I can't ever believe I was that small. I mean, I weighed 180 pounds, and I was 6 feet tall, but I think those wool jackets shrink.
They shrink
in your closet. I mean, because I can barely get it around my body now.
What was your scouting report as a football player before you got hurt? If you had to give yourself a scouting report.
Slow, but loves to hit. Pretty slow. I mean, I ran a 4.7 one time, but I was like a 4.8, 4.9 guy. And trying to play corner at that speed was not really good, so they moved me to defensive end. And then I was fast. And I could kind of get under people, but I wasn't very big. I mean, a 180-pound defensive end in Texas high school football now would be it wouldn't exist probably. I mean, not many of them, but so yeah, I just simply love to hit, and I did not like to get hit, so I didn't like to play offense. But I really enjoyed knocking the heck out of people.
So it's funny, football's played such a big part in your life, and I read this, and you shared this a second ago, but your wife of more than 40 years, I believe,
Yes.
you guys, without realizing it, crossed paths on a football field in 8th grade. Would you mind sharing that story?
Well, yeah, okay. So I actually went to the school that had really tremendous athletes in Lubbock, and we won the basketball, and we won baseball, we won football city championships all the time, basically all 3 years of junior high, 7th through 9th grade. Well, there was a team in the town that they just really couldn't field enough boys, and it was pretty much a poverty school, and so they, you know, the other kids in junior high teams were not allowed to use their first string players against this team. So when you played this team, you had to use your second string guys, or at least you couldn't play your top 11 or 15 players on your team. So the coach made a couple of changes, and although I got to play defense and start, I was not in the top 15 players on my team. So I actually got to play against this small school who had to play the second team. And it was on a Saturday morning. It was a makeup game, and it was muddy in Lubbock. We played at Lubbock Monterey, and it was a muddy, nasty field, and it was just a miserable day. And we were all out there, and we didn't really want to play these guys, second team. And there's our 15 buddies sitting up there in the stands, cheering us on that are the first teamers and all that. And so we played the game, and we lost to them 2-0. I think it's the only game we lost in any sport, really, when I was in junior high, in 9th grade especially. We went on to win the city championship. It's the only game we lost. And years later, when my wife and I were talking about, she was a cheerleader and I was then we realized that we were both at that same game that day. And she remembered it, and she gives me a hard time about the day Carol Thompson beat Atkins 2-0, and it was miserable. It was a safety, and the rest of it was in the middle of the field with a bunch of little boys slopping in the mud. But I remember they had this big, cool cowbell. It was mounted on a trailer, and I found out also that her dad had made that, and I remembered it. I remembered, wow, what are they doing with that cool thing? And my wife's dad had made that cowbell. So there was a couple of cool things about that story, and then we met later in college. But we grew up in Lubbock, and really, Lubbock is not that big, 150,000 people, 100,000 people in those days, and you kind of knew everybody. But I did not know her. I knew some other people from Lubbock High because that's where my parents went to high school. In fact, my grandparents, my parents, my wife, lots of people went to Lubbock High School in my life.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I asked you what came first, love of acting, love of sports. You said around the same time. When did the arts when did it go from, hey, this is fun, to, hey, this is kind of what I want to do?
It was automatic, and this is one of my favorite stories. What happened, Jared, is that my coach, when I had to quit my senior year because of my knee, I just couldn't. I probably could have brought it back, but it wasn't really in my heart. I'd always thought, yeah, I'll be a football player and get a scholarship and all that. But I really realized that I wasn't, fast enough or big. I just wasn't going to be that guy. And so I went in to quit with Coach Clark, and I went in his office. Man, I was crying. I'm senior in high school. I had to quit, and I went in and I said, Coach, I just can't bring this knee back. I'm not going to be able to play. And I was crying. He said, Brad, that's okay. He said, he goes, you love choir and drama, and I've seen you doing the plays and all that stuff, here in school. And he said, you're not going to play football in college anyway. We might could get you a small school something, but you're not, it's not your deal anyway. So why don't you just go be an actor? And what a great coach to because this boy was, he was devastating to me. I said, Coach Clark, I've never quit anything in my life. He said, Brad, it's okay. And here's the best thing that happened, Jared. He says, that locker in there in that varsity room that you earned that has your name on it in there, if you ever want to come back, it'll be waiting for you.
That's pretty cool.
That's a great coach.
Yeah.
And a great guy. So at that point, my senior year, I started really thinking seriously about, and my buddies and people in my life had told me I'd always said I wanted to be an actor. Even when I was a little boy growing up, I'd always said that. So my senior year is when I really started thinking about it. And then when I went to Tech, I majored in theater, and I got in the first play in the fall and never looked back. And that's just what I thought I would always do from the time I went to college. I was one of the lucky ones that knew what I wanted to do. So
you've been in films, you've been in TV shows, you've made cameos, you've had recurring roles, you've and you've done theater. And we're going to get into the theater in a little bit. You've done the arts at so many levels. At that point, for me, I knew I wanted to do, once I realized I wasn't playing a professional athlete, I knew I wanted to do sports journalism, but I didn't know right away that I wanted to do sports play-by-play. There's so many options out there, and I sure as heck tried all of them. Did you know, was there something initially you're like, I want to do this specifically, or were you just so open to doing anything and everything?
It was pretty open. I saw doing movies and TV, but I realized that stage was the first step. And, to us, it's not like nowadays where these kids, they just skip school and go directly into it. It was more about going to school and really becoming a real actor on stage. And then the film and TV came along later. But, we dabbled in it in college, little small student things. But in those days, we didn't have the ability that they have now. We had those giant, big, huge, ugly, bulky video cameras and, no lighting. And so we didn't get to do a lot of film or TV prep in college. It was stage work. And I did lots of plays, and my first professional acting job was at a dinner theater. And I can remember it was a 2-person show called I Do, where it takes a couple from the time they're 18 until they're old, and you watch them get older and older, and there's costume changes, and there's 16 musical numbers and a bunch of dances. And I remember the girl and I, it was our first show, and I was 21, I think, and she was 19 or something like that. And we were getting $200 a week. We thought that was great,
you
man.
You made it.
Yeah, we made it. We're getting paid to act, $200 a week. This is awesome. So that was the beginning, sort of.
Was that? I know this is a generic question, but sometimes there's a good story attached to this, so I'll ask it anyway. I don't know if it's that, or was there a moment where you're like, this is the break I need to really kind of break through the wall and just get some momentum?
I guess it probably was, because what happened is that I came to Dallas working and running a nightclub down on Greenville Avenue called Nick's Uptown. And I had worked for these guys in Lubbock, part-time while I was going to school and doing plays and stuff like that. And I had managed and bartended and all that kind of stuff with their club in Lubbock, which was called Fat Dogs. It was an iconic place that was there forever. But they opened a place in Dallas called Nick's Uptown, which immediately became one of the hot spots. And we did live music 7 nights a week. Excuse me. And had everybody play there. I mean, everybody from B.B. King to Ray Charles to, Willie Nelson. So we had all of these great acts. And I told them, look, I'll go there and I'll general manage that club. And they were paying me a lot of money, especially when I was 28 years old. That's when I left Lubbock, and I had done my time there, so it's time to go to Dallas and do things. And so I said, look, I'll do it for 2 years, and then no matter what, I'm going to be an actor. And, I'll kind of put it on the side for a couple of years. And so I did that. And then after 2 years, I said, okay, that's it. And I went from making a lot of money. They gave me a company car. They gave me a lot of perks. It was really worth it financially, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I just became a unemployed, making no money actor, and I did a play down in Deep Ellum with a guy who is now extremely famous by the name of Tracy Letts, I can't even go into his resume, but anyway, I did Mac Murphy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and we had a ball, and it was really off the hook. And an agent saw me, one of the Dallas agents. There was only a few, and he saw me and said, "Do you want to do film and TV? Do you want?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I would like to represent you." And I said, "Oh," and I knew at that time who the casting directors in this part of the country were. There were only about 4 or 5 of them that were significant. And I said, "Well, if you'll get me in to see so and so and so and so and so, get me in to see these ladies, I'll sign with you." And I'll be dang if within 2 weeks he got me in to see all these casting directors. And within 2 weeks I got Silverado, which was my first feature film, and that was huge. No, actually, I got Dallas first. Dallas was the TV show, of course, it was on, and I got paid on Dallas, and that was even better. It was a lot better than that $200 a week. In those days, it was great. I went in I got there like 7 in the morning, and we shot this scene. I only had 2 little lines, but it was my first union lines, real actor stuff. And so I went in, I said my 2 little lines, and in those days, the scale was $440. And so I got my $440 for about 4 hours work that morning. I said, "Yeah, this is great. I really like this."
Yeah.
And then within about 2 or 3 weeks, I got Silverado. So my first, the most watched television show in the world was Dallas at the time. I forgot the amount of viewers they were getting, but it was some ridiculous amount of millions all over the world that watched it every Friday night or whatever. And then getting Silverado, which was a big Hollywood Western, Costner and all those people were in it. So my first 2 shows were huge, and that I didn't have huge roles, but they were huge shows, so that really helped. That kind of shot me into really into the market.
All right, I don't want to fast forward, and I know your career is so much more than Friday Night Lights, but I got to ask you about both the movie, the TV show, the Friday Night Lights experience. So you were one of okay, so I know yourself and Connie Britton were in both. Was there someone else who was in both the movie and the TV show?
Yes, Jason Street's mom, Catherine Willis. Nobody ever says that, but Catherine was actually one of the booster wives in the movie as well.
Okay.
And then she was Jason Street's mother in the series.
Okay.
So that was the 3 of us.
That was going to be your daughter's mother-in-law then, the way that...
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So, yeah.
All right, so the movie came first, and I've read about this story. I think it's a great story involving Peter Berg, but I'd love if you wouldn't mind sharing how you got the role of John Aubrey, right? Was that the...
Yeah, that's right. That was his name.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I think about it. Buddy Garrity was... I know that name by heart, but I had to look up what your name in the movie was.
I would have had to look that up, too. I forgot John Aubrey. And I always thought Buddy was after a real Buddy Garrity that is in Odessa. He's still there. What a great guy. And he is... I really thought that Peter Berg... I thought that he probably got the character from the real Buddy in Odessa, who was the principal of Permian High School, and what a staunch supporter. I mean, he was the real Buddy, and but it wasn't. That name came from someplace else. I thought it came from there, but experiencing him was
unique.
Was unique. And we had always known about Permian because Plano had a long history with those guys. And by the way, I'll just throw this in there. Plano has played Permian 4 times, and we're 4-0.
When was the last time? Recent?
Yes.
Or?
No, I don't think we'll ever play again. We're so far from each other in districts and whatnot. But I don't remember the last time. I think it was in the 90s, I think. I'm not sure. But anyway, so I'm rambling. I'm off track.
So getting the role.
Oh, yeah, getting the role. So I was in Austin for another picture or another audition, and I was in a hotel, and I saw Pete walk through, and I'd heard about the movie, and I'd read the book when it first came out. To me, it was the greatest sports book ever, and it came out so many years before we actually made it. But I thought it was incredible, and I loved the book, and I knew Pete was doing that movie. And I walked by him in the lobby of a hotel in Austin, and he just kind of looked at me too long. I was like, why is that guy looking at me? But I knew who he was, and I knew my agent was trying to get me in to see him. And I walked past him, and I just kind of nodded and smiled at him, and he kind of did way too much of a man-to-man look at a guy walking through a lobby. Like, what the heck was that? And then the very next day, I had an audition with him. Walked in, and he didn't want to do the lines. He wanted to improv, and he just immediately wanted to improv. And for me, that was really fun, and it worked. And that's how, and I knew when I walked out of there, really, that I had that role because it was. And I wouldn't say that it was something that I knew because I knew a buddy, because there weren't buddies in those days. I mean, I know there are now, and there have been for a long time, but in those days, if there were any buddies in high school, which was my only experience with it, we didn't know it because the dads respected the coaches so much. Whatever Coach Clark says, that's the deal.
Yeah.
They didn't have guys coming in there trying to tell Coach Clark
marching
or Coach Kimbrough and marching in the office saying, "Oh, here's what we're going to do."
Yeah.
No, that
Come
didn't.
up with plays,
if that
like your own
existed,
ideas.
we did not know
Yeah.
it because everyone totally respected John Clark and Tommy Kimbrough to the point of being afraid of them. I mean, we didn't even want to talk to them because they were so, So that's how the movie role came about. And then after doing the movie, and it was 3 months on the movie, we spent a month in Odessa. I love saying this. My sister lived there, so I can say it, but Slow Deatha. So we spent a month in Slow Deatha, and those people, we thought they would hate us because they were not so happy about the book.
They didn't love it,
But we got there, and they were different than that. They really supported us, and it was a tremendous time. And then a month in Austin and about a month in Houston, where we played the state game at the old Astor Dome. That's where we played it in the movie. And so after that, the TV show came along, and it just, I don't know what, it was just automatic, really. I didn't audition. They just called my agent. They just called my agent and said, "Well, we think Brad will be right for this role."
Was it a no-brainer for you to take that to go?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And yeah, because it's funny. I knew who Kyle was.
You're talking about Kyle Chandler.
Yeah, Kyle Chandler. I didn't know Connie. I didn't know a lot of the other people, and I certainly didn't know all the young actors.
Well, you didn't know
young.
Connie before the movie.
Before the movie.
Okay.
Right. But it just came along, and I don't think it was about a year later, I think, after the picture, that maybe it was longer than that. Might have been within 2 years that we did the series.
Yeah. I remember, so growing up in Texas, loving sports, I read, the book came out, or it was put in front of me at a time when I didn't love reading, and I really love reading now, but I got through that book really quickly, watched the movie, and then I remember the first episode, I remember exactly where I was. I wasn't sure how the TV show was gonna play out, and I remember thinking that the Dillon Panthers, and I was like, what? And I watched the pilot, and I don't even think I allowed myself to get through the pilot, and I was like, I don't know. I love the book, I love the movie. I don't want anything in my mind, and I really did love the book and movie. I wrote a paper that didn't need to be more than 10 pages my freshman year at USC. I turned in a paper that was, I think it was 30-something pages, and then over 150 pages if you include transcripts and surveys and stuff like that. All the prompt was something on social issues, and there had to be a book tied to it. And so I wrote about, so I loved it. And it wasn't until a few years later, I ended up watching the finale of Friday Night Lights. I think the last season I was caught up, so I was watching live. But it wasn't for a few years that I got into it, and then once I started, I couldn't stop. But I don't really fully remember why. I didn't give it a chance right away, but I think that TV show, that movie is one of my all-time favorite movies. The book, one of my all-time favorite books. And I think that TV show was so powerful because it tackled so many issues.
Yes.
It wasn't just.
No.
I told my wife, years ago, I was like, have you seen this? And she said no, and she was hesitant. She thought it was just going to be some football show. I was like, no, it really, if you're in it only for the football, then maybe it's not the show for you because It's about so much more. So I guess long-winded way of asking you, I know the movie does this, but it's obviously only, an hour and a half, 2 hours. What's it like being a part of a show that tackles these issues when you know that you're maybe making an impact in the messages that you're delivering and the experiences that you're sharing?
Yeah. And that's a great question, Jared. And I got to tell you, there were many times when, having lived it, having been around it my entire life and being such a sports fan, that we would get these scripts and I would go, no, this is, you guys, Hollywood, this is not the way it is. This is too dramatic. This would not happen, blah, blah, blah. And so many times I would say that to them and say, we just can't do this because it's not telling the truth. I mean, it's too whatever. And they'd say, Brad, this is a TV show. It's not real life. So I got over that quickly. But, in the beginning, I would get with Kyle, and on Wednesdays before the show would air in the beginning on Friday nights, we would watch the show because I wanted to watch the show before the general public did, so I could see what they edited, what it came out to be, and all that. And Kyle's like, who's fairly nonplussed about it. Yeah, we'll watch it. So we'd watch it and we'd have a couple of beers. And that didn't last very long before I realized what he said. He said, Brad, I really don't care that much about watching it. It's so much fun to do this. And, that grew on me, and it became the truth where I didn't really even care if I saw the show or the final edited product, because living it and doing it was so much fun. And it was so much, although they gave us great scripts, and those scripts went through the process, had to go through NBC, through network execs, blah, 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 all the writers for months spent on these scripts, they still gave the actors complete freedom. So if we felt like the line should be said like this to get the point across, then we would. And many times we just freeform. And there, one of the great things about that show that people still try to copy is that we had, usually 3 cameras, and it was such a guerrilla type shooting that it wasn't the regular style of TV, hitting marks, rehearsals, camera, then these close-ups, then this master shot, all of that. It was just 3 steady cams shooting us, and we would just walk in a room, not rehearsing, just do the scene, and then just do it again. Maybe do it with different words. And those guys would just find a spot to be in the room where they could shoot us, and they would, you couldn't see the other camera. And then we'd send these takes, we'd do 5, 6, however many takes. But by the time we've done that, with all those camera angles, you got 15 or 20 different versions. Send that to NBC editors. That was a nightmare for those guys to try to edit that show. But it became something that we all knew. And in the beginning, I was staunch about, hey, this is a nighttime soap. This is not how it really is, although I always wanted to make it like it really is. The people, I kept telling people, this is not a show about high school football. This is a nighttime soap opera about, community and family and relationships and coaches and teachers and learning things in life. And there's very little football in it. And what football in it's pretty much the same. We win.
Yeah.
And then people would say, it's not that way, with these long touchdown passes.
Like 50,
they're
Matt
saying,
Saracen's
I'm sorry, baby, but go to the Texas High School State Football Championship games. It is like that. They win on bombs.
Heck, Duncanville lost 2 years ago on a Hail Mary at the end, I think.
Yes.
I forget who they played, but
Yes.
I remember watching that.
Yeah, it happens all the time. So, but the cool thing was that NBC, and that's why we didn't have the ratings in the beginning, because the women thought, well, I don't want to watch Texas high school football. So they didn't realize it was a show about relationships and about, and they didn't. So it took years for it to catch on.
It was one of those shows that, I guess they're movies that when they hit the theaters, not a lot of attention, and it's not until maybe they're released on TV. Like I don't know why Pitch Perfect is one I think about. Like it became this big deal, but not in the theaters. And I guess I forgot this because maybe I was a part of the problem. I was one of the people who didn't watch it right away. But the TV show was like that. Maybe didn't get the attention right away, but then, by second or third season, people are clamoring for more and more and more. And I guess that's interesting. I didn't think of as to why that might be, but it really was like it was captivating in a lot of ways. And there were those shocking moments, like when Landry, when Jesse Plemons takes was it a crowbar or whatever, and
Yeah.
and you know that like I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen the show, I'd encourage it, but kills someone, right? And
Right.
you know, it's just like that, and then there's relationship stuff, and your character was a part of that in a lot of ways. I read that you would go to the, you know, whether it's the writers or whomever, and campaign, I guess, for certain storylines for Buddy Garrity, and that I thought that was so interesting because it's not unlike when you're playing a sport and you're going to the coach, I can do this, or put me in here. So what's that process like as an actor where they've got their ideas, just like a coach has his or her ideas, but you know, you're not, this isn't your first rodeo, so you've got ideas. So what's that balance like where you want to fall in line, but you also, if you have an idea, maybe it's worth something, and you want to pitch something for your character.
Yeah, and and there was a lot of that. I mean, I didn't have enough power really to pitch and make it stick, but they would listen occasionally, and especially if I would talk Kyle into it or something. But lots of times I would just talk to the director, and then he might talk to the writers or the producers or whatever, and say, it should be like this. It's not like that. And I got many of those times when Brad, it's a TV show. But at the same time, people eventually learned that it is what, and what kills me is that now it's more watched than it was. I mean, I can't even believe how many people now are just now watching it. I mean, we stopped shooting 10 years ago. Crazy. And we have, and I've noticed this through that Cameo app. I'm on that Cameo app, and I've noticed that I get people from Germany, England, Australia. It's showing all over the world, and many people are just now seeing it for the first time. Many people are seeing it. I get these things from people that they've watched the whole series 3 or 4 times. I mean, that's 75 hours of television, and they've watched it over and over again. I mean, I will admit I've watched the entire thing, but it did become such a labor of love that didn't care. Just enjoyed doing it and telling those stories. I don't think that's the answer to your question.
No, but listen, hey, you could tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, was there I read that you wanted, so Buddy's character ended up getting divorced, had an affair, right? And I read that you had asked to have a second chance, to have another relationship, and they didn't want any of that. Was there something that you did kind of pitch that they did adhere to, that they allowed, your ideas to kind of actually come to life?
No, I said, hey, Buddy has not had a date with a woman in 3 years. I mean, after season 2 or whatever, and Buddy screwed up and lost his wife, and lost the girlfriend too. He never got another chance. And I would always say, do I ever get to be married again or have a girlfriend? Come on, Buddy's not single. And they're like, no, you have to pay. You have to repent and pay for the rest. So I never, ever had another woman after that huge mistake. But I know what I was going to say a minute ago about that Jesse Plemons moment.
Yeah.
And people talk about that being jumping the shark, and it nearly ruined our show because it was so out of the ordinary. Well,
was that because I wasn't live, I was still watching when I saw that episode. So was that controversial, like when it happened? Like
Yeah.
Okay.
People hated it because it just was so out of our show.
Yeah.
But the reason they hated it, in my opinion, and I'm sure that some of the producers and the writers would argue with me about this, but when that was written, it was Landry and Tyra, and they were, sort of boyfriend and girlfriend, whatever was happening to them at the moment. Well, the way it was written, this guy comes up and starts mugging and is going to hurt somebody, and Jesse is protecting her. The way it was written was that it was just a quick reaction where they were in fear of their lives. He was in fear of her life, and he just quickly reacted and hit the guy, and the guy died. Well, they shot it and edited it where it looked like he consciously tried to kill the guy, which completely changes the whole thing. And people would have never been upset or thought that the show jumped the shark, and they talk about season 2 nearly being ruined because of that, if it hadn't been edited that way, where they edited it like he premeditatedly ran across the lot and killed this guy when he didn't have to. But the way it was written was he was just trying to protect Tyra. Anyway, I had to backtrack on that.
Well, how does that? So I am totally unfamiliar with the the process here. So how does that pass through all the gates and get released in that way if that wasn't the intention? Is that just, I mean,
That was, they shot it a bunch of different ways and they edited it that way.
so like the director or the writers, they don't get final approval. I mean, you turn it over to the editors and kind of whatever they do with it is what
the
comes out?
directors, the editors, and the network, I think kind of they all make that decision together.
Got it. Okay.
And for the director to even let that scene play that way at the time was a risk, because that, like I say, that's not the way it read on the page. And so they took it because of the movement and just the way that it just wasn't an accident that he killed the guy. It seemed like more premeditated. I think that was a weird choice, but luckily we didn't get cut off, because a lot of people were like, okay, that ruined it. They'll never have another season.
Well,
and we were always in fear for another season. We never knew.
It ended up 5, how many seasons? 5 seasons,
Five
right?
seasons. Yeah. And that second season was cut short because of the writer's strike. And so there weren't as many episodes in season 2 as there had been. We were, in those days, television was 22, 23, 24 episodes. And now, an entire season of television, maybe 8 episodes, 10. So that season 2 was cut short, and then we went back to doing 20-something each of the last seasons.
So I don't know why this is always something that I spend time Googling, and maybe it's because I grew up playing sports and chemistry and the, your teammates and the camaraderie was something that I loved. I always try and figure out, like, does the cast get along? And I'm heartbroken when I find out that this character, this actor, and this they don't talk to each other. And it's like, it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
It seems like, and I'm sure that, everyone had their favorites, and I'm sure not every single person got along, but it does seem like the cast, especially the core that was around for all 5, if not most of the 5 seasons, did get along. I'm curious, who do you keep up with still?
All of them. As many. I mean, I definitely keep up with Kyle a lot.
Kyle Chandler, okay.
Yeah, and then
was he your close? I mean, you've talked about him.
Yeah,
Was he your
buddies.
closest?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we were buddies. We hung out. We played golf. We did everything.
And he's in Austin, or does he live in California?
He left California.
Okay.
I believe it was right after the first season. He moved his family to Dripping Springs.
And the show was shot in Austin, correct?
Yes, in and around Austin.
Yeah.
I mean, we shot some things here, as you know.
Yeah.
At Texas Stadium, the old Texas Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
We shot at Cotton Bowl. We shot at the Astrodome. And we shot a couple of scenes in New York. Shot a couple of scenes in the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
But nearly everything was in and around Austin. Lots of little towns, lots of different stadiums and stuff like that. But, around to that question that you had about the camaraderie, we actually knew after a while, not only were we good buddies, it was such a family show. And this isn't just cast. This is the crew too.
Yeah.
It was the most fun on a show that any of us had ever had, and especially the young ones who had never really, a lot of the new stars had really never worked. It was their first big thing, and we were just very lucky to catch lightning in a bottle, as cliche as that sounds. We knew it while we were doing the thing, and Jared, to tell you the truth, we even said to each other, aren't we grateful to have this job? Every day. It was like, this is so much fun. This is what acting's all about. We're doing something that is, for TV, we just felt like it was important. We felt like it was true. We loved the fact that it was about relationships, and that it truly was a universal show. And the fact that there was a Texas high school football backdrop did not bother us. And what bothered me was the real hardcore sports guys. It was stupid to them because first of all, they don't really watch soaps. They don't watch nighttime stuff. And then when we did the sports, they were like, yeah, sorry, but you're not going to win on a Hail Mary every time. And we didn't. I mean, we didn't win every
but I get, yeah.
But the real hardcore sports guys, I was always kind of mad at them because they didn't glom onto it in the beginning. And now they've changed their minds. I mean, many of them still have never watched the show, but it's fun.
Kyle Chandler.
And Jesse, Jesse's a huge movie star now. Yeah, Jesse's from Mart, Texas, and actually won a couple of a state championship at Mart.
So was he like
he was
a
a
decent
player?
football? Okay,
Yeah,
all
I
right.
mean he was slow.
Yeah,
He's very slow, but
now
Jesse,
he's married to Kirsten Dunst, and he's like
they got a little baby boy named Ennis.
That's
And I'm
crazy.
sure that came from Ennis, Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, but anyway, he grew up outside of Waco in a little town called Mart, so he was a real player. And then Riggins, Taylor Kitsch,
And he's become a
he was a hockey player, so he was an athlete, not a football player at all,
but an athlete.
But he was an athlete and definitely became pretty much a football player. Smash was not an athlete at all, which was
Gaius Charles. That's
Gaius,
okay.
Gaius.
Yeah.
Let's see. But a few of the other characters in the show I had worked with many, many times over the past 20 or 30 years because we were sort of the character actors around this part of the country. So a lot of those guys. But anyway, your question was
just the relationships.
Yeah,
right?
the relationships.
Do you keep up with
and
Kyle,
I keep up with them, a lot of them. Mostly Kyle and Jesse, and then a lot of the guys that. Michael B. Jordan's become such a gigantic movie star. He's untouchable. I mean, I don't know who talks to him. But I still talk to Connie, and I talked to her on her birthday, and I talked to little Lila. I talked to the daughter. I call her fake daughter, and this is fake dad, and happy birthday. We still keep up, and she's a beautiful and wonderful thing.
Yeah, I thought when I first started watching the show, I just kind of pictured you were going to be my father-in-law because I was going to marry Minka Kelly, and
there you go.
Live happy ever after. But when you guys are hanging out, so you guys are going to dinner after shooting or whatever. I mean, obviously you're not Minka Kelly's dad, but you play that. Like, is it tough to, I don't know, like do those roles, do they just totally go out the window the minute you guys are off set? Or do you feel like you carry some of that around when you're around those people?
I carried it around. I don't know that everybody did that. I think some people did. And Kyle sort of did just because he's such a great leader and a great guy. He just is a really good person.
So he has some of those head coach qualities just in general?
Absolutely.
That's really neat.
Even though that he wasn't really that kind of a football fanatic. In fact, I don't think I ever saw Kyle stand out there and pass the football.
Really?
No. I mean, he just always stayed away from, that. But Kyle he's kind of a natural athlete in many ways. He picked up golf. We played a lot of golf together and still do. We play in some charity tournaments, and we play together in Austin. But I was trying to think of others that.
Let me ask you this: the relationships, just in general, are like fascinating to me. Was there someone who wasn't just making a cameo, who maybe you didn't hit it off with, and you knew that, hey, we're both going to be around for however long. Let's work to make this relationship better.
No.
Okay,
No.
so everyone. I mean, it was just.
I never felt that. Now, what I did feel was sometimes these actors would come in and they got a good role. There's going to be a couple of episodes. There's a big part or whatever, and they would have those lines so down, because we do. That's what we show up. We need the lines, but we would say to them in the makeup trailer, "Hey, just throw those lines away. I know you know them, but when we go in there,
we're just rolling.
We're going to roll. Yeah. There's no telling what we may say, so don't just listen." And play with us. And they're like, what? Are you kidding? Well, there's no marks. We don't have to hit our marks. We change the blocking. We may stand up. We may sit down. We may run. Just go with us. Just remember, that's what this show is. And a lot of those people were very intimidated by that because if you're not used to it, it's kind of weird.
Some people like direction, right? They like to know, this is what I need to say. This is where I need to be. This is.
And most actors, the best ones that have been around, the professional ones, that they really were trained in the theater and on stage first. I mean, nowadays it's different. Nowadays people are trained for camera, and so one of the most important thing is that they know the words inside and out. Because once you get in front of cameras and you've got a crew and you got to be here and you got to have this cigarette and you got to turn this direction and blah, 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 blah. All of the extraneous stuff is so big and so much to remember that the lines just have to trip off the tongue. If you're thinking about your lines, it's going to be impossible to listen to and not get nervous to all the stuff that's going on around you and having to shoot a scene over and over again and change it and blah, blah, blah. So, it was intimidating for a lot of the people that had just come around, but for the rest of us who were there all the time, it was just roll, and it was a blast.
Okay, I could ask we might have to do a second episode later on because I could ask you a million more questions about Friday Night Lights, but that would not be fair to your career, and I want to make sure to cover other stuff.
Okay.
So you mentioned you're a character actor.
Yeah.
Was that something you embraced, or was that something that you fought initially?
I embraced it. I mean, even in college, even though I might have been much thinner and much more of a leading man, I did. Excuse me. I did a lot of leading men roles in plays, but from the time I really started doing film and television, I was always a character. I was never the lead guy. Recently, I got to do, from one of your buddies from USC, young director, a picture that I did over in Fort Worth where I got to be the lead guy, but he was more of a character. He was a high school football coach in that movie called The Last Whistle, very small, independent picture. But I had a blast playing that guy, and we shot the entire picture in 14 days in Fort Worth. Yeah, 14 days. And it was a joy. It really was. But yeah, I've always, and I never had a problem. I loved playing cowboys and bad guys.
Yeah.
And that's what I did a lot when I was younger. A lot of bad guys, a lot. You know, from In the Heat of the Night, God, it just, yeah, a lot of bad guys.
Brad, who's someone, so, and there's no way you would remember this, we met in the press box prior to the Cowboys-Packers playoff game in which Aaron Rodgers pulled off one of the greatest throws I've ever seen to Jared Cook.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but you're close friends with Brad Sham, who is a mentor of mine, as is Eric Nadel, and I would say those two would certainly be at the very top of the list for the question I'm going to ask you. But are there people, or is there someone who professionally was a huge influence, and when you look back on your career, like that individual, just whatever it was, they had a real impact on your growth and your development as an actor?
Well, I think it started with my high school drama teacher. She recognized that I loved it and helped me. And then my college mentor, the teacher who he actually started the theater department at Texas Tech. He was a World War II veteran, and he had been in a prison camp for 5 years during World War II, and then came to Lubbock and started the theater program. And he was the god of that theater, and he really made me feel like I should do this and I can do this. And so those two, and then once I started doing film and TV, Peter Berg really gave me a lot of confidence. Not that other directors had not given me that, and I had worked with a lot of great directors. I mean, Lawrence Kasdan and just Andrei Konchalovsky, who was this great Russian director. I mean, I'd worked with great directors, but I think Pete sort of gave me the freedom and made me think, I can do this with anybody. And, I've been blessed to have been able to do scenes with everybody from Paul Newman to, I've done scenes with, Brian Dennehy, Paul Newman, huge, great actors. And it always feels like it's okay. I mean, I make it somehow. Recently as I've aged, it is sometimes harder to remember things. You do forget a little bit, but it's just, you'd work harder. Just have to work harder.
I think it's funny because you mentioned some, Paul Newman, Brian Dennehy, tremendous actors. You've been in shows with some cult heroes like Chuck Norris and and Steven Seagal, and I think like Buddy Garrity, kind of like Walker Texas Rangers. But I think Buddy Garrity in his own way is like it got your own little like path and your own little room of like heroism, I guess. Like people just like they connect with with Kyle Chandler and with Buddy Garrity. I think more than any of the other characters. But I'm just curious, was there someone you worked with who you're like, holy smokes, like I can't believe I'm working with this individual, man, woman, whomever?
Well, recently I did that picture, Deepwater Horizon.
Oh yeah.
And it was Wahlberg, who is awesome. I mean, you talk about prepared. This guy's the most disciplined.
He's regiment, right? Like
he's
he
the
gets
most
up at
disciplined
4
he
and
gets.
like, works out. And
unbelievable
like,
every day. I mean, this guy is, you talk about work ethic. I mean, and what a great human being. I mean, he's just really a good family man and a great person to work with. And then Malkovich was on
Uh-huh.
there. And Malkovich and I, it was interesting because we played the two bad guys in that picture. Not necessarily bad guys. When I say that, Pete Bird told me, Brad, the bad guy's he never thinks he's a bad guy. But anyway, Malkovich, had always been somebody that was very interesting to me as an actor, a tremendous actor. And so getting to know him and realize what a regular guy he is, because you sort of think of him as a very intellectual, sort of weird dude, but he's such a Midwesterner who loves sports and just can be right on the page with anybody. And so getting to work with him, and then Kurt Russell just made me feel so good. I mean, he came up to me and actually said, man, I mean, and this sounds weird, but he said, you're really a good actor. And coming from Kurt Russell,
Yeah,
that made me feel
sure.
special.
That's different than if I say, Brad, I've loved your work.
Real special.
Yeah. Coming from him is.
Yeah. So those guys recently have been really something. No
How have you
doubt.
gotten better as an actor? Like what's
You just,
yeah,
I think, I've learned to relax doing it. I think that's the most important thing, because for us to be smooth and polished and real, I think we really have to be relaxed, and it's not a veneer. It's got to come from the real guy. And I think that's what they gave me, that freedom playing Buddy. I think I learned, even though I'm not Buddy at all, really, in real life, there's some things about him that it's the truth. My daughter had just, when that scene where Buddy is so drunk in the beginning of the series, and he's drunk at the big pep rally, and he's really mad about that other guy coming in. He thinks that other guy's trying to horn in on his territory. And there's all the kids there. And both my real daughters were there that night, having fun with Dad. They were extras over there in the pool or whatever. And I had that big scene with Lila and Kitch and Riggins, where they would pull me out of the mud, and Buddy was so disgusting and mad and drunk and blah, 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 blah. And there was a lot of costume changes, because I would fall down in the mud and we'd have to change into the new pair. And the scene took a long time, a couple of hours, and my daughter was watching. And it's probably the biggest compliment I've ever had, because she came over to me after we'd wrapped that night, and I was all cleaned up, and, I was back in my street clothes, and she came over and she looked up at me and she said, Dad, are you really drunk?
Oh.
And it broke my heart, but it also just filled my heart, because I was acting I was acting good enough that my daughter thought I was really drunk, and that's coming from the daughter. So anyway, that was kind of a special moment, getting to do that and have her say that.
Have you brought them around set a lot? Is it something you like to avoid? Is it?
No, I don't mind them coming at all. And they came a couple of times, and they were in crowd scenes and stuff on Friday Night Lights, and they were young girls at the time. So
what do they do now?
My oldest daughter is a nurse in Lubbock, and my youngest daughter is in Austin, and she's a dancer and also a Pilates instructor.
Oh wow!
So yeah, they're my pride and joy. And it was all, I always had fun with Lila, because I had real daughters. So, and I think I was probably a little bit more trying to be her real dad than she was trying to be my real daughter. But she hadn't lived with her dad that much. And so we kind of had a fun little special relationship.
How do you balance? I mean, gosh, it seems like your career, you're all over. The time commitment is, you're not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Was it tough balancing career and family? Was there something you learned early on how to do it? Because I'm sitting here just candidly, like with baseball, and in the off seasons I do basketball and some football, but that's not every single day.
Right.
And, I don't have kids yet. I'd love kids one day. But there's stretches where I barely see my wife, and she's super understanding, which makes it so much easier on me. But I can't imagine it's too much different for you. So I guess I'm curious, how have you gone about balancing that? Because it seems like you care about your daughters. You're not, you're a part of their lives. I know sometimes you're just they're your daughters by blood, but or kids by blood, but you're just never there. But that doesn't seem like that's you. It seems like family's been super important to you.
It has, and I've been lucky to be one of those dads who could be with my children a lot of their life. My wife's an actor as well. She's not doing it anymore, but she knew, and she really gave up a lot of her career. I have to give it to her because she gave a lot of her career for mine. Mine was a little bit ahead of hers as far as making money doing film and television. She was a great stage actor and worked at the Dallas Theater Center as well. But she had also done a lot of film and TV. And then she took other jobs to help to support the family in our drier times. And so I was really the one that got to go and got to do what I loved and didn't. I mean, early years, there was a lot of other jobs that I did to support. I used to do a lot of things downtown in the Arts District. We basically ran the Arts District back in the 80s and 90s, where we did every festival down there, concerts, everything in Artist Square, and all of that down there it was my side gig, which was awesome. So I could make some extra money doing all that crew work and still sort of being involved in the business. And so that was supplemental, but having a wife that was understanding. And yet, there would be times when I'd be gone for a month or, whatever. But really, in those 5 years during the show, during Friday Night Lights, that was later on in my career, but I would come home. So I had an apartment in Austin. I'd stay there 5 days a week, and best of both worlds, come home and see the family on weekends and go back to work during the week.
Did you drive or fly?
Always drove.
Always drove. Yeah.
Always.
It's not a bad drive at all.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
And I figured it out one time. I made 90 round trips to Austin, and only one time on 35 did I get in a backup because I was so aware of it, and I went at exactly the right times. I went between 10 and 2 on weekdays, and almost never on weekends until after 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it's a science. You can't.
It's a science to 35. And I've really never got in a traffic jam out there except
Speeding
one
tickets?
time. I got one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got one. It wasn't too bad. I think.
Were you Buddy Garrity when the cop pulled up, or were you?
He
Bradley
didn't know him. He didn't know Buddy Garrity. I was hoping he did. Sometimes they do.
So, okay, I got one out of left field question, and then I want to ask you about your theater experience. This is so random, and I only thought of this because on my way here, I had to place an order for something, and the caller ID must have showed up. So instead of asking me my name, they saw it, and they're just confirming it was me. And my name is spelled Jared. It's pretty, Jared is not Steve or, Bill. But it's not the most uncommon name. It's not. And the lady asked if she's like trying to sound out my name, and Jard, and listen, that's totally fine. I'm curious, has anyone ever try to call you mispronounce your last name you can't really mispronounce Brad. I don't know what you could do, but have they ever mispronounced your last name or try to make it something that it's not with the
Leland?
Yeah, was it which
Leland
is actually
yeah, but not much.
Okay.
And that's really my middle name. That's not really my name. My name is actually Bradley Leland. My last name's Williams.
Oh, okay.
So that was my middle name named after my uncle and my grandmother's side of the family. My uncle was a famous football star from TCU. He was actually All-American in football and track. In the 1931, TCU was 7th in the nation, and he led the nation in yards per carry. He was carrying 7.1 yards per carry, and in 1931 ran a 9.6.
Wow.
And
100?
Yeah, 100. And that was 100 yards.
Yeah, yeah.
But his name was Leland. His name was Cy Leland, and he's in the history books over there at TCU, and so that's where the Leland came from my grandmother's maiden name.
So you changed your name? Is it just because Williams is a common name, and you wanted to what?
It
what
was
led
weird.
To that?
I joined SAG, and when I first joined SAG, I signed up as Brad Williams, and because I did Brad Williams for Dallas and for Silverado.
Silverado, yeah.
So both those were that name, and then the union said this name was in our roles, and there's some agent had it. We don't find an actor that has that name right now, and as soon as they said, but in the future, your residuals might get confused because of this name. I went, okay, no problem. I'll change it immediately.
Is that why people, like, I always just assume, I mean, I'm sure there are a variety of reasons, but that's one reason why people might change their name is just to avoid any future confusion?
Yes.
Okay.
And,
all right.
and years later, it's really funny. There's this really famous little comedian now. I said little because he's a little person. And his name's Brad Williams, and he's a huge, huge comedian. He was born, sometime in the 80s or whatever, but now he's a very famous Brad Williams. And it's like they kind of mess our IMDb pages up. They give me some of his credits and him some of mine. It's real funny.
So quick story on that. I grew up, and I'm Jewish, and every little Jewish kid around my age loved Adam Sandler because of the Hanukkah song.
Yeah.
Because, it's like, here's this roster of famous Jewish people when you're 6 years old. So you know that, hey, like, there are other people out there. And I lied to kids at Hebrew school and told them, or Sunday school, whatever. I never wanted to go because it always got in the way of football on Sundays. I missed kickoff for the Cowboys games whenever they had a 12 o'clock start.
Oh, wow.
It pissed me off.
Oh, wow.
But I made $12 over a 4-week stretch once because I charged $2 per autograph request for my fake uncle Adam Sandler.
Oh, that's great.
And I would just, in cursive, to Brad, Adam Sandler. Well, my dad found out. I eventually had to return the money. But it turns out Adam Sandler has a nephew, and I once posed as his nephew named Jared Sandler.
Oh, my.
Who not only same name, went to USC. We were in the same fraternity.
Wow.
4 years apart. But we always joke with one another. He's a stand-up comedian. He does so. He's an actor, but he also does a lot of stand-up. And I'll get, on Twitter, like I'll get tagged in a tweet that I'm performing at some club in wherever in the country, and he gets like sports tweets or whatever, and so we get mixed up. So we joke that one of us, we're gonna play rock paper scissors one day, and one of us is gonna have to change their name.
Yeah.
The problem is I don't have a middle name, and he does. So I've pitched to him. He's got to change to Jared Mitchell. But I think there's some value in having the last name Sandler in Hollywood. So
yeah, there is. Although I was not a huge fan of that most recent picture, the one that everyone said he's being dramatic. He's not.
Oh, Uncut Gems?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
So
my favorite picture.
My wife walked out of that because she was so on edge she couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Like it was, it's a different movie.
A different guy.
All right, so theater.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dallas Theater Center, your most recent role there and your return to the stage was playing Scrooge.
Yeah.
I'm just curious with that role and in general, I think understandably people, when they think of you and your career, they think of the screen. But you've mentioned a few times that, it started with the theater, it started with the stage, and that's when you were coming up, that was like you had to master that before you did anything else. That was the training ground. So I'm just curious how special is that time to you, and then just getting to go back and play Scrooge.
It was absolutely the most fun and the most gratifying experience I've ever had, including FNL. I mean, FNL, of course, made me a lot of money, still does, and you suddenly become recognizable, and that was never. Being famous was never it. I just loved doing it. And of course, when you're younger, I told you earlier, being the center of attention and being a total idiot and doing things, that was part of it. But it became, when they let me do Scrooge, and I got to do that with a bunch of really good professionals, not just the other cast, but the musicians, the crew, the entire thing. And to get to play every night, Jared, in front of, we were sold out for all 50 performances. That wasn't always full, but
50 in 30 days.
In 50 performances in 30 days, that's 2 a day, and we were dark on Mondays. But to get to do that rigorous on stage, that's your life thing. I had an apartment right next door where I would just walk to the theater and go back to the apartment, sleep and eat. But to get into that structure, like a regular job where you do it every single day and it consumes you. You don't do anything else. And then to play for 500 people 50 times, that's 20,000, 25,000 people. Not that many, but something like that.
Sure.
And to actually, and plus the story and the role. I mean, just the story itself, one of the greatest stories ever written. And it's Christmas time, so automatically the people love the show. They automatically love the story. They've seen it before. And to go in there and have that symbiotic relationship with the audience, which for an actor is the best, the most fun, to be live and to have all those things that happen that are, brand new every day in the performance. There's something that's new, and that fear that turns into, a really wonderful experience. But to have them, and because it's such a built-in standing ovation every day, so to get to do that twice a day for a month, and then the rehearsals as well. But to me, it was definitely the most fun I've ever had in my life. And that story, is such a great, great story, and everything about it was just. It's a great character, and I loved it. It was the best Christmas I've ever had. It was the best Christmas present I've ever received, and it was also the best Christmas present I ever gave. That's the way I look at it.
Very cool.
It just was, yeah. It was. I would do it again, and even though it's a tremendous amount of work, I would love to do it again. I'm still not too old.
So, okay, I got two more quick questions based
Yeah.
on what you just said.
Yeah.
The first is, and I'll lay them both out there to maybe give you a second to think about it. What else would you like to do or accomplish? I mean, you could never do anything again in your career. I mean, it's incredible the amount of work you've been a part of. But is there something that's out there that you'd like to pursue? And is there a specific role that is out there that you'd like to play? I mean, just hearing you talk about Scrooge, is there a character you've yet to play if they remade this or if they did this, or is there a character, and just generally speaking, is there anything out there you'd still like to accomplish?
There's a picture that if we ever go back to work, which there inklings of it, it's really, we're not back by any means, but there's a picture that I will be doing if we ever go back to work. We're going to shoot it in Iceland, and it's an old man that lives up in the mountains, and the story is about a young girl who continually goes back up to him for advice, and he's just a sage, an old soothsayer, almost like a Merlin character from Camelot, like a wizard. Although
And that's your
it's
role?
modern day, yeah. And that's
Okay.
my role, which is why I'm growing my hair long and my beard long. He's just this old enchanted man who has this incredible advice for this young woman and sort of guides her through her life. And so that's something I look forward to doing. It's a huge role, and it would be a nice stretch, something different than what I've been doing recently. I mean, it's not that I actually played Merlin in Camelot, so I've played these old guys before, but to play one now would be really something. And then, I have to say, I have a dear friend who is my favorite writer. I went to college with him. He has written so many movies, and I'm in all of them. And he and I have been collaborating for a long time, yet to get any of his pictures or television shows produced. He's the best writer I know, by far. He's read more than anyone I know, by far. He knows more about history, and his name is Derek Horton, and he is absolutely undiscovered. There's so many of his pictures that I would like to finally one day produce, not direct. I'm not interested in directing. He should direct. I would love for him to direct me in one of the pictures that he's written. And they're every kind of thing, from sweet little pictures like Anne of Green Gables to the most ferocious, nastiest, his most recent one is about the KKK in East Texas, which happened back in the 1920s. True story. It's perfect for now. It's all about the horrible things that happen, and this wonderful, wonderful man who. Anyway, to do one of Derek's pictures is a goal of mine, and for him to do it, for he and I to do it, and in fact, the lead role in this picture should be Michael B. Jordan. He may be out of our reach right now, but it's perfect for him. So those are two things I would like to do, and to get back on stage and play. It wouldn't have to be the lead. It could be almost anything. I'd love to do it. The one thing I've yet to do, although I've been on the stage of the Schubert Theater in New York and in New Haven, Connecticut, but they weren't big plays, they weren't big productions, so to do a role in New York is definitely a goal that I've yet to accomplish.
Well, there you go. Episode 72 of the Just a Set conversation with Brad Leland. Man, that was awesome. I think if you watch TV shows, there are certain shows you watch and you get from start to finish and you're glad you did it. And then there are other shows that you really like invest in and you feel like you know the characters and you certainly during the show and maybe in the minutes or hours or heck even days after a particular episode, you're feeling the show still. And Friday Night Lights was one of those shows for me. And it was really, really cool for me to get the chance to chat with Brad, and I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. All right, well, appreciate you for hanging out with us. Episode 73 coming your way next week. Excited to share that with Pat Doney of NBC. Get to know Pat and his really, really unique story. As always, like, share, comment, any of that stuff. Would really appreciate it. Thanks, as always, to Zach Rowe for his production work for this series. Till next time, stay safe, be healthy. We'll talk to you later.